On a Wednesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes, we look at what lines could potentially be in store for the Canes as they look to extend their season a little bit longer in Game 5 on Wednesday night. Are we going to see a return of Jalen Chatfield or Sean Walker? How can the Hurricanes replicate their success from Game 4 and bring it into Game 5 to forcing Game 6? And then finally, we're going to end the show with who's going to make the biggest impact for the Hurricanes as they look to win and survive another night in the Eastern Conference Final.
You're Locked On Hurricanes, your daily podcast on the Carolina Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to a Wednesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you to the everydayer for making this your first listen of the day. 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, talking everything about your Carolina Hurricanes. I'm your host, Zach Martin. I'm the credentialed Carolina Hurricanes beat writer over at the Hockey Hours, also the co-host of the Surgecast, which is a weekly Carolina Hurricanes podcast, along with all of my duties here at Locked On Hurricanes. Like I said at the top of the show, we're going to look at potential lines that the Hurricanes will be throwing out there for Game 5 on Wednesday night against the Florida Panthers. Of course, with the morning skate going to be coming up, depending on when you guys listen to the show, we'll know what lines could be when they come into that. Do we see a possible return of Jalen Chatfield or Sean Walker? Then we're going to talk about how the Hurricanes can replicate their success from Game 4 and bring it into Game 5, because that's definitely where you want to keep building your success on if you're the Carolina Hurricanes to extend your season even longer. And then finally, who is going to bring the biggest impact for the Canes as, like I said, they want to keep their season going a little bit longer? Now, from what we know going into the game, 4 on Monday night, the lines were very interesting because you had, Svechnikov, Aho, Jarvis on that first line. Then it was Carrier, Kotkaniemi, Blake, Martinook, Stahl, Stankoven, and then it was Hall, Jankowski, Robinson. But as we saw as the game started, it was a switch up. You had Hall with Kotkaniemi and Blake, and then there was Carrier with Jankowski and Robinson, of course. Then you had your first and third lines kind of the same. So what does it mean for the Hurricanes going into Game 5? Well, knowing Rod Brind'Amour, if a line combination does really well and they go win that game, then especially in a manner when they did, winning 3-0 in Game 4, I would not be surprised if the Hurricanes kind of run back with that same group, because Rod tries to formulate his lines around who's doing what and how chemistry is going with these guys. So, like I said, it is possibly subject to change after, when we're at morning skate, and even after that too on Wednesday. So definitely keep an eye out as we get closer to game time. But I would not be surprised if it's going to be Svechnikov with Aho, Jarvis again on that first line. Second line, you're probably looking at Hall, Kotkaniemi, and Blake, because they seem to be working really well together. Then you got Martinook, Stahl, Stankoven, which those three have been mostly together for the most part throughout the playoffs. And then Carrier, Jankowski, and Robinson, which is a pretty good fourth line of guys who are got some height, got some speed in, are not afraid to throw hits. Your typical fourth line who could pretty much be the guys who are going to do a lot of the hitting. Of course, defensive pairings, if it stays the same, we're going to be looking at possibly, Slavin Burns, Nikishin, Orlov, and then probably Gostisbehere and Morrow. And that's even with how Scott Morrow played in Game 4, where he played less than 10 minutes in the game. Maybe there's a possible switch up there if the Hurricanes think that Scott's been playing okay, but they kind of want to see if someone else wants to be in there, or there's a possibility of Jalen Chatfield or Scott Walker, Sean Walker coming back. Because when they asked about Rod Brind'Amour about having either one of those options for Game 5, he says there was no update on them. But Brind'Amour did say, obviously, it would be great if we could even get one of them back in there. I think we'll know more tomorrow, meaning Wednesday. So there is a possibility that there could be a chance we could either see Jalen Chatfield or Sean Walker back in the lineup. And if you get one of those guys back, I would definitely see a Scott Morrow coming out of the lineup. Because if it's Chatfield, I could probably see them slotting him in with Shane Gostisbehere, having Chatfield on that right side and keeping Nikishin and Orlov together, just because of, kind of with, that some of the videos that came out on social media, Nikishin does know a little bit of English, but I still think it's enough to where they're probably still going to keep him with Orlov just for the sake of being able to have communication on the ice. So don't be surprised that if we even do get Jalen Chatfield back, and we know how his chemistry has been with Orlov throughout the regular season the last couple of years, there's a possibility that I could see them throwing Chatfield with Gostisbehere, having Ghost on the left, Chatfield on the right, and see how that combination does. Because at least give, if Nikishin's, still playing, which after game 4, Nikishin's put himself into a spot where you really don't want to take him out of the lineup. So if you get Chatfield back, I would say throw him with Ghost, see how they do together, and keep the Russians together on that blue line. And if they get Sean Walker back, same deal. We all know how Walker plays with Ghost. I mean, it's the Ghost Walker pair for a reason. And then you just keep Orlov with Nikishin. So, and if you get both back, then I would say, depending on who's more 100%, I don't see how the Hurricanes can take out Nikishin at this point. So even if you do get Walker and Chatfield back, now you're kind of playing into what the offense has, where they have a bunch of extra bodies. Who do you take out? Who do you keep in? So if you get both those guys back, I still think with how Nikishin's been, especially how he was in game 4, kind of hard to take him out of the lineup right now. But if you get one of them back, then it's kind of an easy decision to make. You just take Morrow out, and then you throw either Chatfield or Walker on that line with Gostisbehere, and just like I said, just keep Nikishin with Orlov, because at least this kind of helps him. He's with the veteran who's been with us, roster for the last couple seasons. Of course, both being from Russia, kind of help with the language barrier a little bit with if he's on a different line pair. Because, like I said, his English it's okay. It's still going to take him a little time to learn like all the other Russian guys. But, when it comes to the playoffs and how impactful these games are going to be, is probably try and give him as much ease as necessary to go through these games. So if we do get a Chatfield or Walker back, I see them maybe being with a Ghost on that pair and keep the Russians together. And if they both come back, then I guess it just turns into which guy do the Hurricanes really want back in the lineup more, and where do you take someone else out if you want to keep Nikishin in. So it's going to be very interesting. But in terms of the forwards, knowing Rod, we most likely will probably see these lines that we saw in game 4 post warmups, to where, like I said, you have Svechnikov, Aho, Jarvis. Then it's probably going to be Hall, Kotkaniemi, Blake, with the Jordans and Stankoven, and of course Carrier, Jankowski, and Robinson. And those line pairings did really well together. So if you kind of run those groups back, and then of course if depending on the defenseman situation, you'd be looking at the same group on the defense. There's a good indication if they can play the same way they did in game 4 and in game 5, they can puts themselves in a good spot. Because if that's the roster right now with the line combos that work best for you, and now you're going back to Carolina with second changed, that is going to be massive, because now you can work on your matchups that you want instead of having to rely on Florida's. In goal, just because of how his performance was in game 4, I would suspect we're probably going to see Frederik Andersen back in the net for game 5. Anything is possible for the Hurricanes, but I can see them running back with Freddie, because after you put up a 20-save performance in game 4 to keep your season alive, and even then, that's even after how the first 2 games didn't really go well for him. But I don't really put a lot of those goals on him. Maybe one, if anything. But other than that, I think Freddie's played an overall decent series outside of the fact of putting 9 goals against him. But that's more of a whole team aspect than just him. I mean, he still has a sub 1.9 goals against average and a save percentage over 910. So if there's a guy they're going to go with, it's going to be Frederik Andersen, just because of how well he's played in the playoffs so far and how much he shut the door on the Panthers in game 4. So most likely we might see the same line pairings, probably see the same D pairings as well, and then probably going to go with Andersen. But hey, things are subject to change. We'll definitely know more on Wednesday as we look at the line combinations, with morning skate being at 10:30 at Lenovo Center. So it should be I'm really curious to see what line combos we go with at that. And of course, does it change when we get to game at 8 o'clock as well? So a lot of things can possibly change between whenever you guys listen to this episode on Wednesday and until the start of game 5 at 8 p.m. Eastern. Now, that being said, what do the Hurricanes need to do to replicate their success from game 4, translate it to game 5, and push this series even longer? Well, stick around and we'll talk more about that here in a second on a Wednesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Cracking a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better-for-you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. Whether you're running between meetings or dropping off the kids, Wonderful Pistachios are the snack that works as hard as you do. Plus, the no-shell Wonderful Pistachios are perfect for that great grab-and-go ease. Get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Welcome back to segment 2 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. Now, for the Hurricanes, what can they do in Game 5 that they were successful in Game 4? So that way they can kind of extend this series past Wednesday night and force a Game 6 back in Florida on Friday. And to start off with, I mean, you look at how the Hurricanes were. They were a team that weren't backing down from the Panthers at all. They were almost giving them their same treatment back to them, getting in their face, pushing them away from Freddie, kind of sticking up for each other. I mean, you saw how, you looked at Barkov and Tkachuk try to get under the skin of Nikishin, and Nikishin kind of just smirked and laughed them off, and he wasn't even fazed by it. He kind of gave them a little bit of a bump back. So it's like they weren't you're talking about a kid who's been a captain for the last couple years and played the last 3 seasons with, SK Moscow over there in the KHL. He's been playing with some grown-ups, some big dudes in the KHL over the last few seasons. I don't think you're really going to intimidate this guy just for the fact of how much he was already a captain at 23. That does say a lot, especially when you're talking about one of the best defensemen in KHL history. So you aren't going to get under his skin. And I think that there's those conversations after the game where they ask just the confidence of this team, bring in the vinegar and the bite to their game. I think that's what went a long way, and a lot of guys talk about. Yeah, it's just we stood up for each other a little bit more. Didn't let them push us around, and that's the thing that the Hurricanes are known for. They're known for their transition game of playing some really stout defense, puck hounding the teams like crazy, making the transitions that work, and then translate their defense to their offense. Play more of a north-south, east-west type of hockey, kind of a full 200 foot game. And they imposed their will on the Panthers. They were giving them fits too. They were giving them the pressure on the forecheck that the Panthers were giving Carolina in the first 3 games. And you look at this one, it's like, this is the team that the fans have been waiting for the series. And now it's like, yeah, you put yourself a little bit in a hole, but if you give this performance every night, I think you're in a better spot if you're Hurricanes fans and even the team as well. So now that the Hurricanes did it in Game 4, now it kind of gives you a little bit of a hope. Okay, if this team does it in Game 5 like they did in Game 4, then anything could happen in the playoffs. Your backs are still against the wall. Your margin for error is very slim now because any game you lose, the series is over. So if you're the Hurricanes, it's almost like you're going to have to go into do or die mode every game. But as long as they keep bringing their system, their pressure that we all know and seen throughout the regular season in the first 2 rounds of the playoffs, if they can match the physicality of Florida to where they're kind of imposing their will and they're not letting the Panthers dictate the pace, dictate the tempo, and all that, I think the Hurricanes be in a good spot. So that's kind of one of those things where you replicate what you did of playing your 200-foot game, you controlling the tempo, you giving the pressure on the Panthers, because that'll go a long way. And speaking into that too, the PK unit once again was absolutely lights out. Back-to-back games with 4 for 4 on the penalty kill, neutralizing the Panthers after they scored, 4 power play goals in the first 2 games of the series. Now you've shut them down to 0 for 8 in the last 2. Special teams is going to have to come up big again for the Hurricanes, and I think there's where the PK's at right now, and that's even with, Jacob Slavin playing 28 minutes a night. That's a lot. I would not suspect you could run him back again like that, depending on how your defensive pairings are set up. But I would say maybe throw Nikishin and see how he does on the PK and the power play, because he did all of it with, Ska. So why not throw him out there if you really need to, just to see what more aspects he can bring to the game. But as long as the special teams keep playing strong, I know the power play was okay. It wasn't great. They had some chances and stuff like that. Still maybe a little bit too much passing, but if the Hurricanes are still able to at least get one power play goal in Game 5, that'll be very huge for them. But the thing to replicate to help them in Game 4 or in Game 5 to have that success from Game 4 is making sure your PK stays strong once again and just kind of build on top of that as well. So as long as their special teams keeps playing the way they do, I think the Hurricanes are going to be in a very good spot. And it's just, sticking to what works. Tim Gleason's going to get those guys running very well, and that's where it comes into playing to your system, playing into you making great defensive plays. I mean, Jacob Slavin was on another one on Monday night, 4 block shots, some very key pass breakups, using his stick work to, speak for his game. And that's why you see a lot of praise coming from Jacob Slavin after Game 4, just the performance he put in. So if you add that with the other defensemen, I think, that's where kind of, you're able to shut down the Panthers because, Rod Brind'Amour talked about after the game when they were showing the video from his, in the locker room with the guys talking about how they were just the PK was so dialed in, and that's what you need in the playoffs right now. Because if your PK is able to keep stopping whoever you're facing, not just the Panthers, it's going to set yourself up because now you're forcing the other team to score on you 5-on-5, and that's what the Hurricanes are known for, is having a really good penalty kill. So as long as they can keep replicating what they're doing on the PK, they're going to be fine. It's adding that power play back. If the power play can at least get one every other game or however it goes, then you're fine. It's just you got to make sure you're getting those little extra advantages for you. And yeah, the Hurricanes played a lot closer game. That's why they were able to, stifle the Panthers. Because if you start going into a run and gun system, then it's just kind of tough because the Hurricanes, while they can score in bunches, that's just something they could do, where it's like, okay, we're just going to, shoot the lights out and get like 5-6 goals a game. They have scored 5 or 6 goals in some games, but you're talking the playoffs, you're usually not getting 5 or 6. And just Florida was able to capitalize. But if you're getting games where it's like, 3-1, 4-2, those type of games, and yeah, this is where the Hurricanes really thrive on really stout defense, because if you're limiting them to 2 goals or less per game, then you're putting yourself in a good spot where maybe you do get an empty netter and you get 3 or you get 4 goals yourself, but you're kind of dictating the pace and you're not playing catch up. You're not having to, press as much to put yourself more vulnerable. Now you're setting yourself up there, like I said, dictate the pace, dictate the tempo. So I think that's going to be huge, where the Hurricanes are going to have to find a way just be able to control the game in their aspect of, forcing them to do a little bit more. And that's why with how good their defense was on the PK and just 5-on-5 play in general, that's why you see them holding the Panthers to 20 shots and being able to, shut them out in this game. It's actually very huge. And then, of course, just again, it's just, having some stout goaltending of Frederik Andersen. And if he can come out and do what he did in Game 4 and replicate that for Game 5, then I think you're putting yourself in a really good spot. It's Freddie playing his game, him keeping this Hurricanes team in this game, and not, having this team, having to play catch up if they go down early. And what they did to Sergei Bobrovsky, they were able to put a lot of pressure on him. Logan Stankoven's first goal of the game, his first goal that led into the game winner was high on Bob. It was over his shoulder. That's what you need to do against him. So if the Hurricanes can make Bobrovsky go more east-west instead of just shooting the puck right at his chest, if they had to make him go side to side but shoot the puck up, not on the ice or down near his pads, the Hurricanes are going to be a good spot because it's kind of known that you can beat Bobrovsky high. So if the Hurricanes start shooting a little bit more higher with better quality shots rather than just throwing at his chest or shooting at his pads, which he's good at, if you make him move a lot and shoot high, I think that's going to help the Hurricanes too, because you clearly saw that with how Stankoven scored his goal, which led to the Panthers having to pull him early, and then you score 2 empty netters, and there you go. Now you turn a 1-0 game into a 3-0 game because you got the quality shot that you needed at the right time. And even the Jankowski goal that was called back, he had a perfect shot on Bobrovsky. It's just unfortunately Robinson with his offsides. But even Jankowski's shot got past, Bobrovsky, and it was high as well. So as long as their quality shots are good, they're keeping it high, and they're making a move east and west, I think the Hurricanes are in a good spot. Now, that being said, who are the guys that I think are going to be making a big impact in Game 5 to extend this series? Well, stick around and we'll talk about them here in a second on a Wednesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Welcome back to segment 3 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. Now, who do I think are going to be the massive impacts in Game 5 for the Carolina Hurricanes? And obviously the first one, we've already talked about him, is Frederik Andersen. A sub 1.9 goals against. He's at 184. His save percentage is at 914. And it's just the way he played in Game 4. It gives you a good indication of, hey, if he kind of got back to what his game was, it also helped that the team in front of him played really great as well. So if you're the Hurricanes and if he can just bring what he's been doing all playoffs and bring it to Game 5, I think it gives you a great opportunity because he's kept this team in a lot of games. Outside of Game 1 and Game 2, where it was just bad turnovers and bad defensive breakdowns, which kind of killed the team early in the series, if they can stick stoutly to their defense and stick to their system, I think you're going to give Frederik Andersen a great chance because he's been calm, cool, collected all playoff long. And that's why he has the save percentage and the goals against that he has right now. So, he can just bring that as long as the team in front of him sticks to what they're supposed to do. I think Freddie will make a very big impact once again that could help them lead into winning Game 5 and pushing the series at least another game. So it just comes down to him playing a solid game once again. I think he can definitely do that because he's proven it all playoff long that he can. Like I said, you don't get that record that he has now and, 8-4 and having that really great goals against and save percentage. So I think Frederik Andersen will make a very huge impact for the Carolina Hurricanes in Game 5. And another one, you got to look at the defense. You got to look at Jacob Slavin. I've already talked about him a good bit for the Tuesday show and even part of this show as well. It's that when you play 28 minutes and you had 4 huge block shots, threw a couple hits, and he finishes the only +3 rating, that's really, really good. And it shows why Jacob Slavin's the best defensive defenseman in the NHL. So, of course, if him and the rest of the defense can kind of step up once again, I think that gives the Hurricanes a good chance of, pushing this thing another game at least. But just the way he's been so, solid on defense pretty much all playoff long, even all regular season long, it's showcasing why he is so underrated and why he needs to be more appreciated. Because, now they're kind of talking about Slavin now because, we're down to the last 4 teams. It's conference final play. So, a lot of eyes are on these games. So people are finally realizing that, hey, this Jacob Slavin guy is pretty good at hockey. So if he can come out and just have another solid performance, I think that'll definitely go a long way for the Hurricanes. And you can talk about the big names, like Aho, Svechnikov, and Jarvis. Those 3 got they all got at least a point in this game. Of course, the Sebastian Aho goal to make it 2-0. Jarvis got the Svech passed it to Aho. Aho got the goal. So there's at least 1 point for all 3 of those guys. When that's kind of what you need out of your top line is those guys coming up big for the Hurricanes, which I think they've been doing okay. I know Jarvis has been absolutely lights out so far. He's got 4 points in 4 games. He's a point per game guy. He's made a lot of impacts. But I think if you're looking at someone who's been really making an impact in the playoffs, especially the last couple games in this series, for me it's Logan Staycoven. Back-to-back games with back-to-back goals, and now he has 5 on the postseason, which when you're talking about elimination games, he joins Joseph Vasicek and Warren Foegele as rookies scoring in elimination games. And even then, for rookies to have 5+ goals in one postseason, he joins Warren Foegele, who had 5 back in the 2019 playoffs that saw them go to the Eastern Conference Final, and also, Eric Cole, who, had 6 back in the 2002 playoffs, which saw them go to the Cup final against the Detroit Red Wings when the Red Wings were still surprisingly in the Western Conference. So Stankoven's been joining some pretty good names on this, on this franchise, to the late, Joseph Vasicek, of course, Foegele did what he did was with the Hurricanes. And, most of his career was with, before Rod Brind'Amour came along, but he still had a little bit of an impact with the team. And of course, we all know, Eric Cole is well beloved in Carolina. But if Stankoven can keep up the good scoring that he's had so far this playoff, I think why not have him go for a third straight game with a goal? He's already gotten back-to-back games. Who's to say that he can't have a third? Like, he's been such an impact for this team, and the fact too is that you have one more year of his ELC still having to go for next year as well, which is crazy to think for a guy who's 22 that the Hurricanes still have another full season of an ELC just to pay Logan Stankoven before the cap goes up once again. I think they're talking about the 26-27 season where the cap might go up to $104 million, which is insane. The fact that you're thinking about that, we're going to be looking at a cap era of over $100 million in the NHL for just a cap space. But even then, like, Stankoven's going to get a good payday because the fact that the Hurricanes traded Mikko Rantanen for him and got 4 draft picks along with him. He's been a vital, addition to the team. I think, he's, Eric Tucholsky said it. A lot of people in the organization said this guy was born to be a Hurricane, and that's what he's been. He's been an absolute pit bull. He's been all over the ice, making impacts in all 3 zones. That's why Rod's been having him with the Jordans, because he brings that extra fight. He brings that snarl. He brings that bite to that line that those guys already have, but he's got that scoring ability too, because Rod loves to spread out the scoring. And I think if you can keep Jarvis up there on that top line with Aho and Svechnikov and having those guys together, now you're kind of spreading it out to where it's like Hall, Blake, second line guys who can score there. Then you got Stankoven with that third line. Now the third line has a guy who can score goals. He's already got 5 in the postseason. So if you add that as well, that's huge, because now you're looking at a lineup where almost anyone could score on all 4 of these lines. I mean, Robinson had a career across the board offensively. Mark Jankowski had an unreal run in the regular season as soon as he came to Carolina. And unfortunately, his goal was taken away in Game 4, but he showed some good scoring touch as well. So if you're looking at Logan Stankoven, I think he's definitely a guy to keep an eye on to make a huge impact in Game 5, because he's been making an impact in these playoffs, but more importantly, in Games 3 and Game 4, where he's already scored a goal, at least in either one of those games, and he had a multi-point night as well back in Game 3. So don't be shocked if Logan Stankoven has another impactful game in Game 5, which kind of leads into replicating that same success. If you got your depth scoring, which you really need, I think the Hurricanes are going to be definitely in a good spot into where no matter how the lineup shakes out, if that lineup performs like they did in Game 4 and translates into Game 5 with the same forward core, maybe the same defensive pairings, depending on how that works out. Some guys come back, and with Freddie and net, I don't see why the Hurricanes can't, run it back like they did in Game 4 and do the same thing in Game 5 on Wednesday night to push it to a Game 6. So it'll be very interesting. But if you're talking about guys who I think will make an impact, obviously Frederick Anderson, who's in that again, Jacob Slavin, because it's just Jacob Slavin, and he, just does his thing, which is no surprise. And then if Logan Stankoven can keep that scoring touch that he's been on with back-to-back games with a goal, I don't see why he can't have a third and have another huge game for the Hurricanes in Game 5. But guys, that will be the edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Thank you for making your first listen today. So check out Locked On NHL Game Night. Every night until a Stanley Cup champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you want to keep up with me, I'm at OneTrueZach on X. The podcast is @Ella_Hurricanes. I'm also on Blue Sky at the Zachary Martin, where I do have links, trees in my bios to where you can check out all of my written content at thehockeywriters.com. If you want to check out my other podcasts, it's the Searchcast on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. For Locked On Hurricanes, well, we're on Spotify, Google, Apple, iHeartRadio, wherever you listen to your podcast. Make sure to subscribe, follow, leave a 5-star rating and review, because I might just read it on the show. For YouTube, well, it's Locked On Hurricanes. Make sure to subscribe. Hit the bell notification so you don't miss the show. Hit the thumbs up to let me know if you like the show as well. Share with all other Caniacs to become everydayers just like you. But I hope everyone enjoyed the Wednesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Enjoy your Wednesday, and hopefully we have some fun on Wednesday night as we watch the Carolina Hurricanes take on the Florida Panthers in Game 5 at Villanova Center, and hopefully we're talking about getting ready for Game 6 on Friday. But until next time, as always, let's go Canes.